He thought you'd always be there. He thought your silence was weakness. But what he didn't know is that silence speaks louder than begging. That when a woman detaches emotionally, it's not a pause, it's a decision. And once she chooses peace over chaos, love over fear, and herself over him, there's no turning back. This isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power. And trust me, he's going to feel it long after you've stopped caring. You don't need to raise your voice to be remembered. In fact, the most powerful shift often happens in complete silence. When you stop reaching out, when your messages stop arriving, when your presence starts to fade, that's when the impact begins. Because your silence isn't confusion, it's clarity. It's not passive, it's purposeful. You're no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth. You're no longer begging to be seen. And that sudden stillness, it shakes a man in ways your words never could. Because he didn't expect you to stop. He thought you'd always be there. And he was used to your energy holding the space. Your emotional labor filled every crack. Your care was constant, your concern automatic, your availability unquestioned. He thought your love was endless until one day you didn't answer. Not with anger, not with attitude, just with absence. That shift is jarring, not because of how loud it is, but because of how quiet it becomes. And in that stillness, he hears the sound of everything he overlooked. The small efforts you made, the emotional support you gave, the softness he relied on without appreciating. And when you pull back, the first thing he feels is confusion. He may think you're just in a mood. He may assume you'll come back because that's what you've always done. But when your silence holds, when your energy doesn't return, he starts to realize it's different this time, that you've changed. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. And that realization burns, not because you hurt him, but because you stopped allowing him to hurt you. That's the wake-up call he never saw coming. Not a breakdown, but a boundary. And silence is not punishment, it's protection. You're not ignoring him to manipulate his emotions. You're stepping back to protect your peace. You're withdrawing from a space that didn't nurture you. And when that silence settles in, it creates a mirror he's been avoiding. Now, without your voice filling the space, without your text filling the void, without your energy anchoring him, he's left to face himself. And often that reflection is uncomfortable because it's only now that he realizes you were the depth in the connection. You are the substance in the silence. And the longer your silence lasts, the louder it gets. He starts to feel the absence of things he never even noted. The way you reminded him of his goals. The way you asked about his day when no one else did. The way your presence made him feel calm without him even knowing it. That's the echo your silence leaves behind. And that echo grows. It fills his nights, his conversations, his empty scrolls through social media, and the woman he thought was too emotional or too much, now she's just gone. And nothing feels enough. And he'll try to distract himself at first, maybe with friends, maybe with other women, maybe with temporary things. But nothing lands the same. No one gives him the emotional connection you did. No one feels like home the way you did. That's the trap of taking a good heart for granted. You don't see how rare it was until it's silent, until the calls stop, until the warmth fades, until the woman who gave everything suddenly gives nothing. That absence isn't empty. It's full of the lessons he ignored while you were still trying. And people don't miss you when you're talking. They miss you when you stop. Because talking gives them the illusion of control. They think they can fix things later. They think they'll know when the final straw hits. But silence doesn't announce itself, it just happens. And when it does, it shifts the entire dynamic. Suddenly, they realize they're no longer the center of your thoughts. They're no longer dictating your mood. They're no longer holding space in your mind. And when that reality hits, it hits hard. And he'll go through stages: denial first, thinking you'll come back, then curiosity, wondering why you haven't, then panic, realizing he's lost access, and finally reflection, where he starts to remember everything he dismissed, every moment you stayed silent to keep the peace, every time you forgave things that broke your heart, every conversation where you begged to be understood. But now you've stopped talking. And in that quiet, he hears it all. Every missed opportunity, every moment he could have chosen you but didn't. Now, the silence is the proof. And when you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your power. You stop playing the role of emotional translator. You stop making excuses for why he's not showing up. You stop shrinking just to keep the peace. And in that decision, your silence becomes sacred. It becomes the wall between who you were and who you'll be. No one gets to climb that wall unless they've earned access. And the man who once had a front row seat to your heart, now he's on the outside, realizing how cold it feels without your warmth. And that's why silence is so powerful, because it doesn't seek attention, it commands respect. You're not fighting for love anymore. You're not negotiating your value. You're choosing stillness over struggle, peace over persuasion. And in doing so, you become unforgettable, not because you made a scene, but because you made a decision to go silent, to go soft, to go away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in power, in clarity, in the kind of strength that whispers louder than any words ever could. Softness is often misunderstood. People think being soft means being weak, passive, or easy to manipulate. But softness is actually a form of emotional intelligence. It means you can feel deeply, care fully, and still stand tall in your own worth. You can be loving without being naive, giving without being used, available without being desperate. Your softness is not a flaw, it's a choice. A powerful, deliberate choice in a world that praises hardness. You chose not to become bitter. You chose not to become cold. And that's what makes your presence unforgettable. Not loud, but deeply impactful. And he didn't fall for your body first. He fell for your softness. The way you listened when no one else did. The way you gave your attention without him earning it. The way you created peace around him without demanding anything in return. That softness wasn't weakness. It was emotional courage. It was showing up as your full self, even when you knew he might not match your depth. And at first he loved it. He soaked in your energy, your calm, your care. But over time, he confused that softness for simplicity. He assumed you'd always be soft for him, and he didn't realize that softness doesn't mean you won't walk away. In fact, when a soft woman leaves, it's always after she's given far more chances than anyone else would. She stays longer, she believes harder, she forgives deeper. But once she realizes that her softness is being met with silence, avoidance, or disrespect, she doesn't beg, she doesn't explode, she simply withdraws. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. That kind of goodbye doesn't come with a warning. It arrives quietly. And once she's gone, the absence of her softness feels unbearable. And you made everything feel safe. You made conversations meaningful. You made life lighter without even trying. Your softness was the emotional glue holding things together. But because you made it look so effortless, he stopped noticing. He thought your love was just who you were, not something you were choosing to give. And when someone treats your softness like it's automatic, they forget it can also be removed. And once it is, he starts to notice the world feels different, colder, louder, emptier because the peace you once brought is gone and he can't recreate it. And softness doesn't mean staying when it hurts. It doesn't mean accepting less. It means having the compassion to love someone deeply and the strength to walk away when that love isn't valued. A soft woman isn't someone who tolerates anything. She's someone who believes in connection, in healing, in grace. But even she has limits. And when those limits are crossed too many times, she doesn't fight to be heard. She simply chooses herself. And in doing so, she transforms her softness into strength, a quiet, unwavering, grounded strength. And he'll look back and remember how you never raised your voice, how you expressed hurt with honesty, not hostility, how you gave him space without turning it into punishment. That's the kind of softness that lingers. Because it's not performative, it's not temporary, it's who you are at your core. And now, without you, he has to live with the echo of that energy. No one else brings that kind of presence. No one else mirrors back the best version of him the way you did. And now that reflection is gone. And you didn't lose yourself in him, you offered yourself to him. That's the difference. You weren't dependent, you were devoted. You weren't naive, you were nurturing. But when someone mistakes your love for weakness, you don't need to explain. You just exit. Because a soft woman knows her power doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being sure. Sure of what she brings, sure of what she deserves, and sure of when it's time to stop giving to someone who doesn't appreciate it. That certainty becomes the calm after the emotional storm. And softness is like air. You don't notice it until it's gone. He never realized how much you held him up emotionally, how much you filtered his chaos, calmed his storms, and made his life feel more stable. You weren't just a partner, you were his balance, his clarity, his comfort. But now, in your absence, he's left with noise, with confusion, with emptiness. He'll try to fill it with distractions, with other people, with temporary highs. But nothing will feel as real because nothing is as grounding as your soft presence was. And he'll replay the moments when you were gentle with him, even though he didn't deserve it. The nights you listened, the days you stayed, even when it was hard. And suddenly, he'll see how much strength it took for you to remain soft in the face of neglect. He'll realize that your softness wasn't something he earned. It was something you chose to give because that's just who you are. And now that it's no longer available, he finally sees how rare it was. And that regret, it doesn't fade quickly. And the truth is, people don't forget how you made them feel. And your softness made him feel accepted, safe, valued, even when he didn't know how to return it. Walking away doesn't mean you stopped caring. In fact, it often means you cared too much for too long. You gave your heart with honesty, stayed when others would have left, and tried to heal what kept hurting you. But there comes a point when continuing to love someone begins to look like abandoning yourself. And that's the shift most people don't see coming. The moment you stop pouring into someone else and finally start choosing you. It's not about making them feel your absence. It's about finally feeling your own presence again. That's when walking away becomes an act of love, not for them, but for yourself. And you stayed because you saw potential, because you remembered the good moments and believed they could return, because you hoped they'd grow, change, and one day finally meet you where you've been waiting all along. You stayed because your love was patient, not desperate. You gave more chances than you should have, and you made excuses in your mind for why things felt so heavy, but the weight didn't disappear. The more you tried to carry it, the more it wore you down. And one day you realize love shouldn't feel like proving your worth. That's when something inside you shifted. And that shift is powerful because it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't come with ultimatums or threats. It comes quietly, like a whisper in your soul that says, no more. No more shrinking yourself to be accepted. No more questioning your value just because someone couldn't see it. No more bending until you break. And that whisper turns into action. You stop chasing, stop fixing, stop trying. You begin to detach, not out of revenge, but out of survival. Because when your heart has been taken for granted for too long, walking away becomes an act of healing. And people often think you leave because you're angry. But most of the time, it's because you're tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of not being met with the same energy. Tired of giving love that's never fully received. And it's in that exhaustion that clarity finally finds you. You realize that love alone isn't enough. It also needs respect, consistency, emotional safety. And if someone can't give you that, you can't keep giving them everything. You stop because the price of staying has become too high and your peace is no longer up for negotiation. And he won't understand you're leaving at first. He'll think it's a phase, that you just need time, that you'll eventually reach out like you always have. Because in his mind, you were always the one who held on, the one who forgave, the one who fought for the connection. But this time feels different. You're not trying to prove a point. You're not trying to teach a lesson. You're just done. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, just done with begging to be chosen by someone who should have chosen you from the start. And that realization will come to him slowly, first in confusion, then in discomfort, eventually in reflection. He'll start to feel the absence of the things you did so naturally, the way you checked in on him, the way you made him feel seen, the way your love gave him a kind of comfort that no one else has. At first, he won't connect that absence to his own behavior. But over time he will. He'll start to replay the moments where you gave more than he gave back, and it will sting, and your silence will be louder than anything you could have said. Because words can be debated, misunderstood, twisted, but silence, it's pure. It speaks volumes without saying a thing. And the day you choose not to explain, not to argue, not to plead for understanding, that's the day he realizes you're no longer in the same emotional space. You've outgrown the need to be validated by someone who didn't know how to value you. Your silence becomes your boundary. Your distance becomes your decision. And for the first time, he's left to sit with his own choices, not your explanations. And you may feel guilt. You may second guess your decision. That's normal for someone who loved deeply. But remind yourself, you didn't leave at the first sign of difficulty. You left after trying, after hurting, after hoping. You left because staying became a slow form of self-destruction. And while your heart may still care, your soul knows the truth. Sometimes love is not about holding on, it's about letting go. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Because your future deserves more than your past was willing to give. And letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making peace with what didn't work. It means acknowledging your effort without expecting it to be reciprocated. It means allowing yourself to move forward without dragging emotional baggage behind you. And as you do, you begin to see that walking away wasn't the end, it was the beginning of returning to yourself, of remembering your power, of reclaiming the energy you once gave so freely. And slowly, your heart starts to heal, not because someone else fixed it, but because you chose to stop breaking it for someone else. And one day, he'll realize you were the real thing. Not because you tried to prove it, but because your absence makes it undeniable. He'll feel the contrast between the peace you brought and the chaos that followed. He'll remember how effortlessly you loved and how painfully he let it slip through his fingers. But by then, you'll be in a different place. Not out of reach for revenge, but out of reach because you've grown beyond what he was willing to grow into. And that, more than anything, will be what leaves the deepest mark on him. There's a shift that happens when a woman detaches emotionally. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a big announcement. It's subtle. So subtle that at first, he doesn't even notice. She still smiles. She still replies. She still shows up. But something feels different. The emotional charge is gone. The need to be understood is gone. The desire to fix, to convince, to hold it all together, gone. And while he may think everything's fine, deep down, something inside her has closed. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of emotional exhaustion. And emotional detachment is often mistaken for indifference. But it's not that she doesn't care. It's that she no longer invests where there's no return. She's not angry anymore. She's not trying to get him to change. She's simply tired of fighting for clarity, tired of explaining her worth, tired of feeling like she's pouring herself into a connection that leaks. So she pulls back, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeply spiritual one. It's a shift that says, I love me more now. And that's the kind of love that doesn't chase anyone anymore. And before she used to analyze every word he said, now she doesn't even reread the messages. Before she would break her own boundaries just to keep the connection alive. Now she honors those boundaries like sacred ground. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. Clear about what she deserves. Clear about what she won't accept. Clear about who she is when she stops begging for emotional crumbs. And when she becomes clear, she becomes calm. Not passive, powerful. Because now her attention is no longer up for grabs. And he may not notice right away. He may think she's just busy or in a mood. But slowly the shift begins to affect him. He starts to feel the gap between her responses, the lack of emotional urgency, the quiet confidence in her energy. She's no longer emotionally dependent on his attention. She's no longer trying to win him over. And that absence of effort, it hits harder than any confrontation ever could. Because he can sense it now. He's no longer at the center of her emotional world. And that realization is unsettling. And when a woman detaches, she becomes unpredictable in the best way. She's no longer living in reaction to him. She's no longer scripting her moves around his behavior. She's focused on her own peace, her own growth, her own healing. And that kind of energy is magnetic. He may have taken her for granted before, thinking she'd always be available, but now he feels the shift. She's not angry. She's unavailable, not just in time, but in heart. And that distance speaks a truth words never could. I'm not here to prove anything anymore. And he'll start to remember the old version of her, the one who tried so hard, loved so deeply, gave so freely. He'll compare that version to who she is now, collected, calm, detached, and he'll start to wonder what changed. What made her stop needing him the way she once did? And maybe he'll realize it was him, his inconsistency, his emotional unavailability, his inability to meet her halfway. But by the time he pieces it together, she's already moved into a different chapter, one that doesn't include emotional dependence or waiting for someone to choose her. And the most powerful thing a woman can do is detach from what drains her, to stop proving her worth to someone who only saw it when she started pulling away. To no longer be moved by mixed signals or confused by inconsistency. When she detaches, she no longer needs closure. She becomes the closure. She no longer waits for an apology. She gives herself the peace she was begging for. And that kind of emotional maturity cannot be manipulated. It cannot be guilted. It cannot be undone because it's rooted in knowing, and she knows now that love isn't supposed to hurt like that. It's not supposed to feel like guessing games and emotional starvation. It's not supposed to make her question her own intuition. Real love feels safe, secure, nourishing, and anything less than that, she's no longer available for it. So when she detaches, it's not because she stopped caring, it's because she started caring about herself more. And that kind of love, the one you give to yourself, is the most transformative kind. It's the kind that rebuilds what others tried to break. And he'll start chasing the feeling she used to give so effortlessly. He'll try to find it in others. He'll try to recreate it through control, but it won't work because it was never about her presence. It was about who she was when she loved him. And now that part of her is no longer available to him. He'll scroll, replay, reminisce. He'll wonder what she's doing, who she's with if she still thinks of him. But she won't be wondering the same because detachment has given her peace. And peace doesn't crave chaos anymore. And detachment doesn't mean she doesn't remember. It means she remembers differently, without longing, without pain, without regret. She remembers with clarity, with lessons, with self-respect. And while he may come back around one day, trying to reopen a door she's already closed, she won't answer with anger. She'll answer with grace. But that grace doesn't mean re-entry. It means closure.